he's going to compliment you the entire time. He might be a little fresh.
The keystone in the arch of Star Wars.
It's a show that I dearly love and admire, so thanks for having me.
Sorry, I'm getting like emotional.
And you got this hulking, scary dude with the big nose and the perfect hair.
I understand. This is a safe space. This is a safe space between you and I and all of your viewers.
Cassie and Jim on the beach, and people are like, no. I can literally hear people out there, no.
Rogue One was awesome. I love the Han Solo movie, and then of course I love The Mandalorian.
And like getting to talk to fans face to face and learn their names and just, get to hear their stories.
And in the world of Star Wars, there's a bunch of people who look different. There are different species. There's lizard men. There's psychic baby swamp monsters.
I joke that the best thing about writing Princess Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst thing about writing Princess Leia is everyone knows who she is.
And also you get Ewoks, and I am definitely a lover of Ewoks.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Well, welcome to Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars Fan Talk Show. I'm your host, Pete Fletcher. It feels like it's been a while since we've done a live show. It's been actually a couple of weeks. It's been really exciting times because we are, now splitting weekly duties with my good friend Nick with Podcast of the Will. So we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves on content, which is a great thing, and it allows us to take some time and put things together a little bit differently. And so I'm excited to be back, and I am excited to be back. I was in Las Vegas last week, and the world is completely, just completely, it feels like it's trying to get back to normal, but there's still some strangeness happening. And I think it's one of the great things about podcasting and social networking and things like that is it allows us to kind of maintain that connection and that sort of, that connection to the real world and make new friends and meet new people. And tonight, I'm really super excited because our guest is Alden Diaz. Alden and I have we've sort of like crossed paths and been in the same streams and spoken to each other sort of remotely through social media. This is literally the first time that I will spend more than a minute and a half speaking to Alden, and I'm excited because Alden is outspoken and well-spoken, and he's a really a great sort of ambassador to the fandom, and I think we're going to have a great time talking. He'll talk a little bit about his podcast, Octo Radio, and some of the other things he's up to. If you're watching us tonight live, thank you so much. This is a rarity. Usually we do our interviews with a live virtual audience for patrons only, but since Alden's with us and Alden knows so many of you, I figured it might be fun to just open it up to all of you and just hang out in the chat, give us some questions, bring that conversation with you, keep the conversation going. But so without further ado, I want to bring in Alden Diaz. Alden, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. So does that mean that I can revise my resume and put ambassador to the fandom?
Absolutely. In
fact,
fact,
the top of the resume now.
If you want, we can take a break. If you want to go do that and then come back, we can
I think that we're going to hold a career workshop right here. Everybody pull out your resumes. We're going to do a screen share.
Yes.
But thank you for the gracious intro. It's great to sit back and bop along to the theme song and then see so many of these great faces, some of which that we've both spoken to. We have some great mutuals, like you were saying. It's going to be a good time. People already here in the comments, so
yeah,
solid.
Absolutely. So please, like we were saying, keep those comments coming. We'll try to hang out as much as we can with you there. But Alden, for the people who may not be familiar with you, maybe just give us a little bit of the Alden Diaz background. What's your Star Wars connection?
Yeah, so my Star Wars story it's one of those things where it feels like you have that story just like sitting there on the shelf, like those perfect moments, those perfect series of moments. And it's sort of been in everything that I do. So like professionally, I'm a radio producer. I'm a radio on-air person. I was on a rock morning show for a while. I have produced, most recently produced an all 90s station. And then I do Octo Radio and a few other podcasts as well we'll do the pluggity plug at the end. But the Star Wars stuff has always been so integral to who I am, because I think that Star Wars was the thing that made me realize that you could work in entertainment, that entertainment didn't just happen, because you're watching Wizard of Oz as a child,
right?
And things like that, Willy Wonka, and you're like, well, clearly these are just things that happened. These these are real.
Yeah.
But then Star Wars, you got this understanding like, oh, the grown-ups around me know about this. And they're excited about it still. And there's new ones, but they were also when my mother and uncles were a kid. That's strange, because there's nothing that's this generational, right? There are people that read Lord of the Rings back in the 60s, 70s, and they love it, but that did not become mainstream until the films in a bigger, badder way. So Star Wars just had that mystique of, wow, so it's not just a kid thing. It's something that can be shared. My uncle can tell me stories about this. They know who made this. That's weird. So it's like sort of like George Lucas and Stan Lee and Walt Disney. We're sort of like, these three people can like make things and we just all like it. And so with that, I'm a prequels kid. I'm 26. So Attack of the Clones 20, big year. That was the first one that I saw in theaters. And around that time, somebody showed me I don't know if it was a VHS or a DVD. Someone out there tell me, in 2002, did we have a VHS or a DVD of Phantom Menace? Would I have had a VHS of Phantom Menace?
I'm not sure.
I'm not.
Somebody in the chat will know. Tell us.
Yeah, someone in the chat will know for sure. But so I was watching Phantom Menace, and a family member had these walkie-talkies of a Vader helmet and a Stormtrooper helmet. And I played with the Vader one more because it's just cool. And I was holding the Vader one like in this Hamlet-esque moment. And somebody told me, that little boy on the TV is that. It's a DVD. Okay, cool. Thanks, JD. Said that little boy in the movie that's doing the race is that helmet. That's his helmet from when he's a grown-up. And I was like, what does that... So we get a whole life of this person? Like, that was wild to me, that the Anakin Skywalker story was, again, like something really mythic and that had just been around. So at that point, you do the deep dives and it's everything you can get your hands on, all the DVD extras, and then Empire of Dreams and all the stuff that we all love and constantly go back to. And that's when I knew, like, it started with like, I want to be an actor. Then it was, I want to make movies, and I still would like to, I still write and I still do things like that. But I wanted to be in entertainment as quickly as possible. And I was like, well, I've always sort of done internet writing and I grew up with the internet. And so I was able to get acquainted with all the social platforms very quickly.
Right.
I've always been on almost all of them. The only one I'm not on right now is TikTok because I'm afraid. Like, cause if I take that plunge, Pete, I might not come back.
Oh, you'll have to do all the dances and you'll be putting together 30-second videos every waking hour. I can't imagine. Yeah. Now there's like YouTube Shorts. It's too much. But with that, the first time I was ever on a podcast was when I was 14. It was a bunch of grown adults that all thought I was of age. I didn't lie; they just didn't ask. And I wanted to be a part of the conversation. It was a Batman podcast, and I've always gotten you have such a radio voice. You could do this, public speaking, and all that stuff. And I did speech and debate and that type of stuff. So from there, I had a Star Wars show for a while called Sith Happens. That's on the Mild Fuzz network, which is still going. And then the network's still going. The show was like a closed run thing in the lead up to Force Awakens. And I took a few years off of content creating. And then 2019 started Octo. So there's the very abbreviated history. That was like a really long answer to one question. No, I mean, that's what we would love to. And that's one of the things I try to do with the show is like people like yourself who I've either sort of had a peripheral knowledge of or a slight engagement with, or people I've never met or people I know very well. It's something, it's really interesting. I mean, you're 26, I'm 51, so doubly better.
You could have just gone for the 28 and I would have sold it. I would have been like, oh, of course.
Sure,
absolutely.
Yeah, he's definitely 28. But the interesting thing is, if you have that Star Wars connection and you start there, 9 times out of 10, there's a great opportunity to have a conversation. So the answer that you gave is great, because now I have an interesting perspective. My first question, though, based on that, is what do you think it is about Star Wars? Because even as a 7-year-old, when I saw it in the theaters, there was something about Star Wars that I wanted to know more about how it was made. Like, like you said, Wizard of Oz, I always thought was cool. I watched it and I was like, yeah, that was a movie. And, but Star Wars kind of made me want to engage, even at 7 or 8 years old. I wanted to know more. What do you think it is about these stories? Because they're phenomenal stories, right? They follow all the appropriate steps of the myth, the Joseph Campbell kind of things. But there's also this, hey, I want to do something in entertainment, or I want to learn more about it.
I think that it's, like you said, in terms of the stories, it hits all the beats, and Star Wars being a great story is every great story. So if you grew up and you're like, I was a romance princess swashbuckling, you're sort of like what Princess Bride captures, that's in there. If you were, I watched Bonanza with my grandma, I watched Gunsmoke, all of that stuff, that's in there. Arthurian stuff, that's in there. So it's the accessibility of everybody having a favorite thing. Like on Octo Radio, we have our sister show, The Mandalorian Creed, hosted by Tori Fox. And Tori's way into Star Wars and my way into Star Wars are entirely different. Where I'm really of like the sword and sorcery and the high fantasy of it, and the really heady, like the heady force lore. And Tori's all about scum, villainy, creatures, and that type of thing. So it's the accessibility is part A. And then part B is the fact that Star Wars, and it's something that I talk about all the time, and it fascinates me. Star Wars, more than anything else, maybe up until Kevin Feige, made heroes and icons of behind the scenes figures.
Right.
Where you might know Scorsese, Coppola, you might know, of course, Spielberg. You're going to know some really big names across the generations, Nolan, Denis Villeneuve. But Star Wars made sure that you knew your Phil Tippett's, your Doug Chang's, your Stuart Freeborns, your Marshall Lucas's, your Lee Brackett's. Like, it just went on and on and on and on. And that touches art, that touches writing, that touches, all kinds of art, the sculpting, it touches score with John Williams and now with so many other composers. It was just that thing where they were so upfront about everything, especially during, the from 77 to the sale, really, of here's all cards on the table. Yeah, George was having panic attacks on set. That makes him a really relatable protagonist in that story. When you look at the history of New Hope, how they, rest in peace, Laddie, Alan Ladd Jr., who we just lost the other day. He was one of those believers, and that was there with him and pushing. And so you get the human story, and then you get the next generation of guys like John Knoll, who in the 90s were like, I'm in this because of the originals. And now you look at the next generation. Like I talked to Brian Mattias on my show, who's in the art department under Doug Chang. And it's like, he's working for his hero. And so it's like that sort of real life passing of the torch, I think, makes us all feel like, wow, like this is truly, we're all sitting around the campfire, the pros and the fans. And other people have started to adopt that now. Like Feige being sort of the first super producer celebrity. He has created a similar culture where slowly but surely it was like James Gunn, Taika Waititi, like these different, Chloe Zhao, of course, coming with the Oscar pedigree. So I think that the more that you peel it back, the more people feel like it belongs to them as well. Like look at like legendary artists, like really legendary artists, like the greats of the greats, like your Van Goghs. We're fascinated by that guy because he's a mystery. And so you leave it as a mystery. We're going to want to know more forever. And that contributes to his legend. But Star Wars was just peeling it back and saying, this is who we are. We're really human people. We're in San Fran. We're doing weird stuff. We're making models. And this is how we do things. And so it becomes really attainable.
You make an interesting point at that. And again, this is why I love doing this, because I get to hear these different perspectives of things that just for some reason didn't click. And you bring up an awesome point that the story of making Star Wars in and of itself is as epic a story as any other sort of film that we might watch or story we might read. And I think that's proven by, there's probably never been a film that's been more documented, or not even a film, a franchise that's been more documented from, I remember all the way back to, the early 80s, some of the behind the scenes books and the things like that. And you're right. It does open up, and it doesn't just focus on George Lucas, right? It focuses on everybody who was a part of that story. And much like Star Wars, you can be a bounty hunter, you can be a Jedi, you can be a soldier, you can be a movie score writer, you can be a cameraman, you can be a model builder, and any of those things can get you into that world. And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think that, the story of Star Wars, it doesn't matter how many times they present it to us, there's always something new. There's always a new angle. Like, just because you consumed Empire of Dreams doesn't mean that you won't learn 50 new things by reading one of the Taschen books or something like that, or from the Phil Shostak's Art of books. So there's just such a rich mythology behind the mythology, and they feel like they're happening concurrently. Like, I think that's part of why fandom becomes so ravenous for announcements. Who's going to be doing it? Like, a great example was when, whether this was intentional or not, it couldn't have been intentional because it wasn't a shock, but there was that brief period where we knew who was directing every episode of Mandalorian season 2 except the last one.
Right.
And it was like a couple months where we were like, wait a second, 7 guys and gals, 8 episodes. Someone's either doubling up or there's a huge surprise here. Yeah. And that's where, like, the tinfoil hats of, like, it's George Lucas, like, that I definitely wanted that to be true. I was one of those clowns that I had my clown makeup on when it was Peyton Reed, who did an amazing job. But I think it's because we are so entrenched in the story and the story behind the story, where we're like, wow, what person is going to get this immense responsibility, this big moment? What person is going to come and cradle my thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why, like, when you get a book, even a book announcement, it comes out, or like High Republic, how they assembled that initial team of 5, now it's expanding, but that initial team of 5 authors, it was like lightning in a bottle, that they had these different voices, these different perspectives, all these people that we could attach to, that make you feel like, okay, like, my favorite thing, the thing that I love the most, is in the hands of people that I really identify with.
Yeah. I wonder if, I would love to see the data. I wonder if the gallery, quote unquote, or the assembled things for Marvel do as well as the Star Wars galleries, because maybe it's because I'm a Marvel fan. I haven't missed any of it, but I'm not as ravenous, and maybe it's just me personally, but I wonder if there's that same level of interest behind the scenes stuff, because it's, other than Feige, as you were saying, we don't really, we know the directors that are coming, but we don't get to know the big effects people behind these next level cinematic miracles that we're seeing. So I wonder if it's the same. And as a fan of those, do you find that you dig into that stuff as much, or is it kind of, I'll get to it when I get to it?
I think that I definitely do dig into it as much, but to your point, I don't know if that's because, well, I do know that the level of depth is not the same. What you're saying, I think, is true. And that's not to say that the work is not as incredible and that you don't get as much bang for your buck. They are hour-long specials. They're produced very similarly, but the bench of names, the roster, the familiarity is definitely different. And that comes from the Marvel machine, which is not a criticism, because I love Marvel and I love the MCU, but it definitely is different. So I think that my tendency to immediately seek them out, like, oh, the making of Hawkeye, oh, the making of Eternals, that comes from me. That's because of my interest. And I don't think it's because it is as it's not a promise of, wow, like that was new. Like the Under the Helmet Boba Fett special, like, wow, they got a new George interview. It was 2021. In 2021, they have a new George Lucas interview at the ranch talking about Boba Fett. Like, what else did they ask him? Did they bank up a bunch of footage for future specials? Like, it just immediately is like, wow, a new nugget, a new something. There was the couple of years ago they did it was at the Academy. I can't remember. I think it was at the Academy. They did that special New Hope and Rogue One doubleheader, and Marsha Lucas was there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that type of stuff. Like, oh my God, Marsha Lucas in public, she's gonna say something about Star Wars. Like it just has way more of a mystique around it. Yeah. And maybe it's because we're in Marvel right now.
Yeah.
And it's never gone away. Because Star Wars had its 2 dark times.
Right.
So that adds a level of legend to it. So that's an interesting point too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it would be an understatement for me to say that you and I are actively involved in the fandom. And I wonder if that kind of ownership has resulted in some of the challenges. And first of all, I want to say, and I want to get your thoughts on it. There's sort of that bell curve of fandom, right? There's the extreme, like I would put myself kind of on that right side of the bell curve. That's a little bit, I know way too much. When I see somebody wearing a Star Wars shirt and I talk to them and they ask me, oh, is there some Boba Fett show coming out? I'm like, oh my God, you have no idea. Let me talk to you about that. And I have to dial it back. And then you have the other end, which is the people who are fairly angry, and I'm being very polite in the way I'm putting it, but this part of the fandom that is feeling an excessive ownership. Do you think it's the positive stuff that we just talked about for the first 20 minutes about, this love, this deep love for everything we can find about Star Wars? Talk a little bit about your perspective on sort of the dark side of that. And I don't want to, go down a negative rabbit hole, but
sure,
it's something that's very real that you and I have dealt with regularly, whether we wanted to or not.
Absolutely. I think that there's, to your point, how do we discuss these things without being negative, right? And I think that the best way and the sort of the circle that I feel like I've cultivated is you have to lead with the fact that you love Star Wars more than you love Star Wars fandom. And there are, even if you do love it, and I do, but you have to get to a place, and it's a rocky road. It takes a long time to get there. It took me a long time to get there with a lot of things. Like I'm a professional wrestling fan. My entire life, I've had half of the people that find that out telling me it's stupid. I had to get to a place where it was mine. And I think that, and not mine in a I own it way, or it should be for me way, but in a way of, if Star Wars fandom tomorrow got Thanos snapped out of existence, would you still love those films? If Twitter was gone, if the phone numbers of your Star Wars friends were disappeared from your phone, deleted, would you still love Star Wars? And you have to get to that place where you could cut out everything that makes it connective, and the personal is still resonating, at least with what that would provide. So it's a very loaded thing, but I think that the dark side of it comes from, obviously, lots of real world factors, the radicalization of youth, race relations, some of the political stuff that we're dealing with right now, as with the Amidala Helps an initiative, well, the Amidala initiative at Amidala Helps, with trans youth in Texas, what's going on there, what's going on in the Ukraine, what happened from 2016 to 2020 in this country, what is still happening in this country. All of that, going back to the early days of the internet, has been a slow boil of anonymity fueled rage that is beyond the Star Wars community. But when you put that and you channel it and it crystallizes in an enclosed space in a smaller community, it becomes much more combative, not unlike when you're in an elevator and you just start packing, the people closer and closer together. Tensions are going to rise. You feel the body heat. It's proximity. It's a big part of it. But I also think that when, tying into what I said about loving Star Wars more than you love the club of Star Wars, more than you love the label of I'm a Star Wars personality, or I'm on Star Wars Twitter. Star Wars Twitter is a state of mind. It's not a real place. It's not a place. It's not a section of the app that you tap to get into. There's no password to it. It's a catch-all. These insert thing, Twitter, are catch-all terms for community relations. And if we can veer away from those labels, that would make things a lot better, because those labels breed what I think is really the core of it, which is a sense of it belongs to me, and it has to belong to us mutually, and not us, the collective fandom, but us, the creators and the fandom. Like I was saying with why we love it, they let us in, especially in Star Wars. They let us know who they are. They let us know what they do. They really let us behind the curtain. We need to engage with that in good faith, and don't mistake the fact that they care so much, that they do celebrations, that they do initiatives, that they let you in, that they interact with you, that you can tweet a creative executive and say, hey, what's the name of that ship? And they respond to you. Do not take that as a pass of ownership. You know, it still has to be in the hands of artists.
Right.
And I think that when people start to confuse, and this is in all fandoms, when people start to attach their own identity so much to their fandom, it is a really, really dangerous line to walk.
Yeah.
For it to be a part of you is important. You know, I saw the Batman, no spoilers for the Batman, but I saw the Batman. That is my favorite comic book character. I was moved by it, absolutely moved by it. But I have also had some other iterations of the character somewhat recently that I did not like as much. And that is not going to feel like a personal slight to me, because my Batman love and my Star Wars love and anything, they have to be a part of you. They cannot be all of you.
Right.
And once you make it all of you, then of course it's going to feel like an attack on you. That's why you have to have varied interests. That's why you have to move into different spaces. You have to, I'm not saying break bread with people that are awful. You know, I think that there's a slippery slope there. And there's also a quick, like, knee-jerk reaction in social spaces. So if I say, listen to people with different perspectives, then people say, what, so we're supposed to excuse problematic behavior? No, didn't say that.
It's funny to use that example. I actually tweeted something to that effect, and I was attacked for saying, hey, let's just chill. Well, you can't, how can you say it? But so I'm sorry, go ahead and continue. And
just to wrap it up, but it's like, we need to be able to have conversations in good faith. And, you know, I've seen people that I love dearly in this space get bullied and called toxically positive, but, you know, we've diluted those terms into meaning nothing.
Right.
They mean nothing at this point. At this point, it means anybody that had a criticism feels like someone else not having that criticism is toxic.
Right.
When really what we really all know, and if we were in person, we would be able to agree on. It's just Twitter brain is not, it's not an actual functioning method of communication. To assume the automatic worst of what everything means, it changes the parameters. It moves there's that ideological idea of the Overton window of what's acceptable. And the more you move the Overton window over, it changes things. You see that a lot in politics. So it's like, if we make it so that any opinion from ours that is different on fiction is opinion gatekeeping, or is you know, something toxic to you, then where's the energy when we need to fight? Where's the, you know, you have to be cut out for the resistance that you claim to be a part of. That's a big thing. So,
well, no, and it's interesting too, because there is such an ownership, and I think the reason it has escalated over the last couple of years is because of this sort of isolation that happens. I think I'm going to get the quote wrong, but Ralph, it's one of this quote I just recently saw, and I really love it. It's Ralph Waldo Emerson, I believe, said that a man is what he thinks about. And so from that perspective, if you do take such an ownership of your Star Wars world, or your Batman Twitter, or your political stance, or, you know, your sewing Instagram account, what if that's your thing, and somebody has something negative to say about it, it becomes an instant personal affront. And that's where the knee-jerk reaction is. And I think it takes a certain level of because at the same time, you know, we were saying before, it's really important to play in different areas. But I think that the last couple of years have forced people to, you know, I've built friendships through my connections through Twitter and other social media related as a result of the podcast and as a result of those that I would put up there with friendships I've had since I was 15 years old, just because there's that, it's why online dating might work for some people better, because it's you're getting to know a person. But the problem is then, and we've seen it recently, where those friendships can change on a dime because somebody said something that you disagreed with, and suddenly, wait a minute, I thought I knew Alden, but he didn't have The Empire Strikes Back as his favorite movie, so clearly he's not a Star Wars fan like I thought he was. And then damn, it all goes downhill, and it's a very sort of lame comparison. But the point being,
maybe you're right, though. You're right.
You're living you're all skating on this very thin ice, right? And we all hope that we're all in the same boat, in the same family, thinking about things the same way. And I also think, and I say this very, very gingerly, but I feel like there's a lot of all of us, I don't care who you are, we're all in a different, more fragile headspace, right? We're a lot more the last couple of years, the last 2 to 4 years have absolutely made us a little bit more just on edge and in a little different headspace. And people who were leaning toward an extremism have had the support they need to become more extreme. And as long as YouTube rewards an algorithm that gives people a platform to reinforce some really ugly things in the form of, as you said, fiction, can't underline that enough, a fictional world, whether it's Halo or whatever, it really is fueling some of the uglier parts of fandom.
Yeah, and to your point about, your joke about he didn't have Empire Strikes Back as number one, that comes from, I think, a real prioritizing, and the isolation has not helped. And the isolation pushing us and making us on edge has not helped. It comes from people prioritizing these things, many of which are not real. This is a get off my lawn moment. You're correct. You're correct, Matthew. I pulled up a chair straight onto the lawn. We're just collectively yelling now. But it has this feeling of, if I have a take on something that is not the same as your take, and again, we are speaking here in the good faith that we all, as decent human beings, that or at least we try to be, we're not talking about real stuff. Like, an aside about that is just like, when I have said, and I stand by this, and I'll say it on air, and if you don't like it, direct it at me, don't direct it at Pete. There are people who dislike The Rise of Skywalker and act the same way as some people that dislike The Last Jedi. You say that, and some of those Rise haters feel like you are comparing them to the people that bullied Kelly Marie Tran, John Boyega, that people that didn't like the stories being driven by women, be that Rey or Holdo. And that's not what I said. It's not what anybody ever is saying in good faith. We all know that there is a sect in all pop culture consumption of really reprehensible human beings with behavior that's beyond the pale. Let's move them over here.
Right.
What I'm talking about is people that are, with TLJ, you had your Ryan Johnson didn't do his homework. He just threw out 7. He threw out Force Awakens. Same thing happened with Rise. This doesn't even feel like Star Wars. No respect for the lore. Same thing happened with Rise.
Right.
There's crossover there. And if you don't think there's crossover there, that is ego talking.
Right.
That's just ego talking. So that with that said, there are people, and again, and now we've established what I'm talking about, the good faith. There are people that, when they disagree, let's say it is Empire Strikes Back, and I'm like, Pete didn't have Empire as number one.
Yeah.
If that gives you that much pause, throw a jab, have fun. If that's your friend, you should be able to, right? If that's your friend, you should be able to say, Pete, Empire number one, of course. That should cause part of your fun experience. Those disagreements, that should be fun. If it really gives you pause and actively causes anger within you, then that means that you value that piece more than you value that friend.
Right.
Instead, that should, to me, that should excite you. Again, I go to Tori, or I go to, Nikki, who co-hosts with me, or Nikki Kumar from the Imperial Senate podcast, anybody We all have these varying opinions. Like I have friends that Rogue One is their absolute favorite one. It's my least favorite one.
Right.
But for me, that becomes it makes me interested to hear your perspective. Here's what I thought about it. Here's why it didn't connect. Like that should cause more dialogue, not anger. And when it causes anger, that means that it's not Twitter's fault. It's not Star Wars' fault. It's something else along the way that made you have a rage that is just not being directed.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's it too. And I think that goes back to the point I was making about being in sort of a different headspace now. My rage with my anger about job situations and political climate and this decision, that decision, it comes out in something that I feel like, honestly, I think if you know, I'm no psychologist, but it's an easy thing to fight about. If I lose the war in my Star Wars fandom, what do I lose? Nothing, right? I whatever. It's a no lose proposition. That said, it does give me a little bit of opportunity if I'm looking to fight with somebody for whatever reason. I can get that out. But what it does do is it hurts and it makes the fandom difficult and ugly. And there's, you know, I feel bad for people who really don't, who have a tough time getting away from that, right? Like, for example, in some cases, I'll use the Raylo example from a couple years ago, where this was such an intense and committed group to what was essentially a great conversation among like-minded fans, and they became infiltrated from people who did not agree and saw it as an opportunity to get ugly. What people cannot do on social media for whatever, and I have to say, it has been the most refreshing thing for me over the last 4 months or so, is scrolling by things I disagree with and saying, oh, okay, I disagree, and just moving on, instead of saying, wait a second, Raylo's crazy because, or Rise of Skywalker didn't work for me because, you know what, if you just posted a 5-tweet, you know, explanation as to why you thought the Rise of Skywalker was well done, awesome. If I disagree with it, what's the point? You and I can, you know, we can DM, we can talk to each other on the phone, we could have a conversation. But and I think also when you do it in public, if I was to post something in response to you in public, people then take a side, right? And that's where it sort of begins to build up, as well as sort of a you know, whose side are you on? Are you on Alden's side or are you on Pete's side? And that's just that's a mentality that's not healthy for anybody. And in social, it's so easy to get stuck in those sort of conversations.
And the thing is that, you know what side I'm on? I'm on Star Wars' side.
Right. Yep.
And that's why, you know, that's why I love that you led with Ambassador at the top. Like, I joke about it, but I do sort of take that a little bit seriously. And I've said this to friends in the space that I feel like I'm an advocate for it, self-appointed. Nobody asked me to do this, and an activist for it. People will say like, "Oh, you love all Star Wars stuff." That's unequivocally, patently not true.
Right.
But the reason why it's difficult to suss out which Star Wars things I don't like is because that's not what I choose to curate on my space. That's not toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is when something blatantly not cool happens, or somebody. So there's like a major moment of a social blunder, or the arc of a woman character not being handled well, something like that. There are many examples, and we act like it didn't happen, and we're just like, no, Star Wars is perfect. It doesn't need to grow. It's perfect right now. That's toxic positivity. But for me, it's just about leading with love. What kind of, when someone looks at your feed, what do you want them to see? It's much more endearing, engaging, and it's also harder. It's more of a challenge to write long ass threads, which people make fun of me for all the time, with love. Like some people legitimately hate it that I do that, and that's fine, and they can bring it up every single time because that means they're reading them. Go ahead and read them.
I hated all the words you wrote that I just read, but
yeah, I hated all of them. I made a specific joke subtweet about something you said because I read it and I didn't think of it first, or something. Something to that effect. But I would rather do that until my dying fandom day than fire off a quick "that sucks." Right. That's so easy. It's so easy. There, you would be shocked, not you personally, but in general, the collective you would be shocked at how much the lessons of Star Wars apply to your conduct in not just the Star Wars space, but the fandom space, broadcasting. I like, there's tons of these fan shows and everything, and there's a fan podcast space, but I can tell you firsthand from in the professional broadcast world, in radio, in actual news broadcasting, I've been in newsrooms, I've been in boardrooms, I've been in creative meetings, I've been in production meetings. I've worked with talent coaches. I've been in on air in crazy situations. I've had, I've had goats in the studio. I've had wrestlers in studio. I've had adult dancers in studio. Like I've been around crazy stuff in the radio business of varying degrees, but it all comes from sort of that. You have to lead with the next decision that'll bring you some sort of peace or enjoyment.
Right.
And it's if you go down that path, forever will it dominate your destiny. I think someone cool in Star Wars once said that.
Somebody said that. Yeah. I always think of exactly what you're saying. Joseph Scrimshaw was on my show years ago, and he said, seems like some people aren't really paying attention to Star Wars. The whole, and it's 100% right. And it's again though, I think one of the most important lessons that I think people can learn when it comes to social media, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, whatever you're spending your time on, you can look for the fights, you can look for the negativity, or you can just start to mute that stuff. The mute button is probably your best friend, because it allows you to curate what you want to see, and it also allows you to have those sort of to keep those conversations going in a direction that feels good, so that you can be that Star Wars fan, and still, to the point we're making before. And I think it's really interesting to have these confrontations, if you will, in the social media space. I challenge people to, when we see them at Star Wars Celebration, would this be the same kind of conversation you have? I mean, I always think about a weird situation. I was wearing a Star Wars shirt at the county fair here in New Jersey, and I bumped into somebody who's wearing a Star Wars shirt as well. And they started talking, and it felt like they were sort of feeding back some of the Phantom Menace kind of content, because they told me the sites that they watched. I was like, oh, okay, well, interesting. But when I pushed back on things like, why do you think Rey was, unqualified to be the Last Jedi? Well, I don't know. Yeah, the answer I was getting was kind of like, but it was great to have the conversation. It was great to.
It forces it into the light.
Right. We walked away Star Wars friends, and if you don't love the sequels, totally awesome. That's great. I said it on Twitter the other day. You don't have to love the Batman, but if your reason for not loving it is because of the number of people of color are in it, that's wrong. But you can not like the story. I don't know how. I thought it was fantastic. But if you don't like it, that's totally fine. But let's have a conversation about it. To your point, I love the excitement of when somebody doesn't agree with me. What's more, if you and I just got on and just agreed about everything, that's kind of dull, honestly. But if you love a fandom, if you love a franchise, if you love a story, it's looking for those places where the conversation points exist.
Yeah, and I think that, to your point about like that anecdote with that guy, like we are at a moment where it doesn't feel like it's connected to fandom spaces, but it is, and it will be increasingly so. We're in a moment of sort of thought crime, of an actual war on critical analysis. And it happens in very, very tiny ways, and ways you don't even think about, that are not with ill intent at all. Things like Rotten Tomatoes, which I actively hate. And like people that have had me on their shows before, I blatantly will refuse to give number scores and grades to things at the end, because I feel like that becomes the gamification of criticism. It's trying to turn art into math, and they're not the same thing. Most people don't even know how Rotten Tomatoes works. That it's not a grade; it's just a visual of positive to negative opinion. And so we have things like that are already dulling our ability to think critically. And it ties in with that anecdote you told about the guy, because when you ask that Ray question, why don't you like her? Why do you think that she's unqualified? Why do you think she's poorly written, et cetera, et cetera? And it becomes the real truth is that it's because he was told to think that.
Correct. Yep.
And because we don't implore people to think critically, we don't employ critical thinking as much as we can, and we don't advocate for it. It's why I love, not just because I enjoy writing my thoughts. It's not just because I love breaking this stuff down. I do, but it's also because for every time that I can put out a mini little thought essay while I'm having my coffee on Book of Boba Fett or whatever it is, that's one more thing out there that I put my heart into to think about it on a level that is considered a little bit, it requires a little bit of a deep dive, a little bit of a dig. And I like it. There's the part of me that loves confrontation. I am not perfect. I love a scrap when someone.
Yeah. I wake up and choose violence sometimes. Absolutely,
absolutely. When people tell me, you're reaching, you're looking for things that aren't there, my instinct in the back is sometimes like, yeah, I got you, because that to me just says that you're upset, that your opinion has been swayed a little bit, and that makes you uncomfortable because people aren't secure in their own opinions, which is a thing that I've talked about a lot. Not everybody, but it becomes a thing of, if you post an opinion and you say, I like pizza, someone else posts an opinion and says, I don't like pizza. If that clashing makes you feel like that was an attack or something, that shows that you're not secure in your pizza love. And right. You really should go and have a moment with pizza. Star Wars, I've said, is like a human relationship. You're not going to love everything about them.
Right.
But anyone, the two of us, anyone in the comments that's been in a romantic relationship of any kind, you're just not going to like everything about that person. That's just a fact of life. And they don't like everything about you, but you still love them and you approach it and engage in that way. So that's what I mean by that. And then on the real dangerous side of that, the opposite side of the spectrum from your Rotten Tomatoes, is stuff like, we are having books banned in 2022. Mm-hmm. We're having governors of certain states, this one, Florida, this state, doing things like, let's survey college kids about their beliefs and make sure that and hold the professors accountable for giving these belief surveys to see what they think and there is a war on critical thinking happening. Okay. It's real. It's not like the war on Christmas. That's fake. This one is real. They are actively trying to create, as Carlin said, obedient workers. And we can fight it in tiny ways. Like, I loved in Book of Boba Fett that moment when all of his physical scars are finally healed. And Fennec says, what about the scars on the inside? Mm-hmm. And there's no conversation. She just says the line and then they move on to the next thing. But I loved that line and I obsessed over it after that episode, because I can't imagine how cool and interesting it must be for a 5 or 6 year old kid to hear that line. And that might be the first time that they have a visual or an understanding of like what trauma is.
Right.
They'll think and say, Mom, Dad, what does scars on the inside mean? That is not unlike Yoda when Luke says, what's in there? And Yoda says, only what you take with you. Mm-hmm. Only what you take with you? What does that mean? And raising those questions and making kids think about stuff that it cannot just be answered quickly, that cannot be multiple choiced away, is so important. So important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. And, as somebody with a 9-year-old who we catch every new Disney Plus episode as it comes out, it is great to hear his questions and watch him respond to things and And I think that, we forget that is, it's overused and misquoted when people say Star Wars is for kids. But Star Wars is for the kid inside you, I think, and to be able to explore. And I think that's why it's hard for us to find that same magic when we watch The Force. Like when I saw Phantom Menace in theaters the first time, I was disappointed. And because there was no way at 29 I was going to capture what I had at 7.
Yeah.
And it's that same sort of, I think, so to remember that and try to put yourself in that headspace when you watch the new stuff, and remember that, there's people who their first exposure to Star Wars is happening at that moment, and that it's firing new neurons in their head, thinking about things differently. That's phenomenal. And that's the bitch of the online negativity, is then people go online and go, hey, what did I think of the Book of Boba Fett? Instead of, hey, I enjoyed it, versus tell me what I'm supposed to think about it. And it may damage things much more quickly or tarnish them much more quickly than it should, or might tarnish them in the first place when it shouldn't, is probably a better way to put it.
Absolutely. I mean, how valuable is that perspective? And how much do you wish that, Pete in 1999, that future you would have shown up and said, no, it's not about you.
Right.
How much that would have changed everything. Like, no, open yourself up to the fact that if you love this thing, don't you want it to be all that it can be and explore all that it can explore? And, that's why, we love it. So interesting how we react differently to things. Like, we love it when our favorite band releases an album that tries something new, or as a concept, or is like, whoa, they're doing this now. But for some reason we reject it with some of these formative stories. And I think that if we can get to that place, it becomes a lot healthier for everybody, because especially those kids. I mean, that's what Last Jedi is talking about with They Are What We Grow Beyond. We have to be able to accept that it's not about you. And that it's not about us, and that it is to a point, but it has to be a shared communal experience. I mean, one of my favorite Star Wars moments in my life, in my fandom, was from my nephew. He's 11 now, so he must have been 9 or 10 when this happened. I was playing Battlefront 2, and I think I was playing Heroes and Villains, and I was Luke in the all black Jedi Luke with the green. And he asked me, "Who is that?" And I said, "That's Luke." And he said, "It's not Luke." I said, "Yeah, it is." He says, "No, Luke Skywalker's an old man." And I said, I just turned and looked at him like, "You're right. Luke Skywalker is an old man now." Like that little moment where he didn't even realize it was a moment.
Right.
But that little thing of like, oh yeah, like it happened somewhere along the, I didn't even realize it was happening, but it happened. Like it's locked in now that the Luke in Force Awakens and Last Jedi and Rise is Luke for an entire group of kids now. And I asked him about it, and he says, "Yeah, Mom, my sister, took us to see The Last Jedi at movies in the park, and we were sitting outside, and Rey was there, and she went to him, and he was like the old master that was going to teach her." Zero reverence for Luke, like zero background was put on it. He took it as he's a side character of Rey's story.
Yep.
And that makes people uncomfortable because they don't want to be side characters in the story that they've put themselves into.
Right.
But you have to be able to accept that it grows. I mean, it's the great Anthony Breznican, who was smart to leave Twitter. He did what we all could not. He did what we could not. Breznican said that The Last Jedi is the first Star Wars movie that's not just about growing up, it's also about growing old.
That's
and
a good point.
People could not accept it. And I think that maybe, I think it will have its Empire moment down the road. I think a lot of this stuff will, in the same way that we're in a prequels moment. We're about to go to California and have a 20th birthday bash for Attack of the Clones.
Right. The movie, which for my first couple of years of doing the show, when I asked people, when I used to ask, and I no longer ask it because it's a negative question, but I used to ask, what's your least favorite Star Wars movie? Attack of the Clones, consistently. I've said before, when I saw the Phantom Menace, I was like, oh my gosh, I was never in the George Lucas ruined my childhood mode. But the sequels, or prequels, it took me some time. And now those stories mean so much. And I've told this story before, but my son, his Star Wars is Clone Wars. His Luke, Leia, and Han are Rex, Fives, and Cody. And when you'll find this amusing. I took for granted that he knew that the clones turned. Like, I took for granted that he had watched the prequels and remembered every bit of it. He didn't. They were just, they washed over him like all 9 films did. When we sat together and watched season 7 of Clone Wars, and when the clones turned, dude, I wish I had it on video, because he was like, his face went white, his jaw dropped. All his heroes were bad guys in an instant. And I remember he said to me, he goes, they've spent all their time killing robots. Now they're just robots themselves. And I was like, what an amazing insight from an 8-year-old at the time. And that's his Star Wars, though. And again, like your nephew, Luke is old. Luke will always be the farm boy to me, but to your nephew, he will always be the old guy drinking the green milk. It's what it is. And that's the amazing thing about Star Wars. That's why it's its own genre. And that's why I understand the ownership, but I think people need to recognize, you need to remind people, like people who right now are getting off on bashing the Star Cruiser. Look, that's for the 90% of Star Wars fans that aren't us. They're Disney fans. They want to have fun. They want to go and experience something unique, a unique way to tell a story. And I'm not saying it's not for us, because I think if we were there, we would enjoy it. But it's built to attract the masses, not that right end of the bell curve, right? It's and
it's also an exercise in new ground, like you said, for the parks. Like it's a joint operation. It's an experiment in Imagineering, and we just assume, that tiny bell curve portion, we assume like there's a new Star Wars thing happening, therefore we must be the arbiters if it's a success or not. And really, it's shout out to my friend Nick Tiers, who's a parks expert and just a genius guy. And he was saying in a reply to somebody, I'm not going to look at the world's first car and call it a fancy moving chair. Like you have to be able to acknowledge, like, this is a first, whether it scratches your Star Wars back or not. You have to allow things to be pushed in a certain direction. I mean, look at the volume and how we take it for granted now, having had 2 seasons of one show and another season of another, using that technology. But you have to, if you're going to be the first to do something, you're going to have the stumbles of being the first.
Sure.
Now, I'm much like Scotty in our comments here, friend of yours and mine and everyone's. The local menace, Scotty. I'm a huge Kiss fan. You'd think that they were just received as rock gods when they stepped up in '73 and painted their faces. Like, no, it was ridiculous. Like people do not respond to things in the immediate. What is happening now will never be the story of that thing forever. Why do you think so many websites can make so many? I'm sorry. Let me remember that. So many clickbaity websites can just run articles like, does insert thing suck actually? Question mark. Or alternatively, blank thing is good actually, period. And we call that journalism because we're in a constant sort of iterative conversation of how we feel about things over time. So it's super interesting in that way.
It is, and it's. I think internet journalism needs gigantic air quotes, because there's oftentimes that we're not seeing the full story. I said it today that there's a form of internet journalism that's basically writing book reports about video interviews other people have done and getting bylines for it. But it's because of that fact that Yeah, here's a good a tip for anybody listening. If you accidentally click on an ad when you're on a website, chances are it's not a great site for factual information. If they're there to make money on your clicks, you should probably reconsider it. But that's a whole other conversation. So, Alden, we talked a lot about fandom, and it's been a great conversation. But I do have a 10 question segment that I've done on this show for the 3 years. It'll be 3 years in April I've been doing it, and they're all they're kind of like inside the actor studio type questions, but they're all Star Wars related. So I'm going to throw them at you. There's no wrong answers. I won't judge you. The internet will, but that's because the internet gives short answers, long answers, whatever you like. We'll if you're into it, I'll throw some at you here.
What is your favorite curse word? I used to watch that show so much as a kid. So glad you said that. Okay, I'm ready.
So, what is your favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book? Some people give all three. I'll leave that up to you.
I will give all three. My favorite Star Wars book, glances at the shelf. It's I usually throw out Star Wars Last Shot by Daniel Jose Older. That's the Han and Lando novel. For those of you that haven't read it, it takes place in 3 time periods. So it's Lando shortly before Solo, Lando at L3. It's Han shortly after Solo. So after Kira has left him and he's going through a really bad time. And then it's Han and Lando after the original trilogy when Ben Solo is a toddler. And they're on this pulpy adventure. It's awesome. And then I would also say probably The Rising Storm as a recent favorite. Kevin Scott's The Rising Storm. It's just fantastic. So that's book answer. You said television show and movie. So yeah. TV's easy. It's Rebels. I love Star Wars Rebels. Right now, we are doing a rewatch Between Worlds on Octo Radio, which is an entirely Rebels focused deep dive rewatch. So beginning to end as commentary tracks, but then we also are doing. So you get the whole episode of a commentary track. You get all of our analysis, our thoughts. We watch all of the behind the scenes. We're going back to all the Rebels recons with Andy Gutierrez. It's a whole exploration of that. And I just love that show so much. It's just a perfect slice of Star Wars. And then film, I have an announcement to make. For those of you on Letterboxd, it took everything in my power to finally do this, but I came to a realization. So my entire life, Return of the Jedi has been my favorite. And Return of the Jedi, I think, is my favorite of the originals easily. I've always said it's my favorite film. And I don't think that changes. I think what I'm about to say is like there's some wiggle room. But for the first time, I went into my Star Wars ranking and I hit edit and I dragged Last Jedi up to number 1. And I haven't done that ever. It's always been Return of the Jedi. Right. And if I could 1A, 1B it, I would. If I could have a tie, I would. But I think that I'm now going to live a life allowing myself to ebb and flow between Return and Last.
Sure.
And of course, like I'm obviously being dramatic about this for anybody watching. For people watching that are like, he can have more than one favorite.
Doesn't this guy know? It's
like, but it's just like is that situation where I realized the one that I think about the most, talk about the most, and analyze the most, the one that I think, as a really big like acting, performing fan and person, like I love theater and things like that. I think Last Jedi is the best acted Star Wars ever, period. Mark Hamill should have gotten a supporting actor nomination. Like it's gorgeous. So right now that's where I am.
Interesting. Do you find that, I mean, I think it's funny when I do my rankings, which I don't do that often, but when I do, as much as I love The Last Jedi, it's I have to say it's probably my favorite Star Wars story. I think it's one of the most amazingly shot films. And as you see people analyzing it and finding all these little subtle things that Rian Johnson did, amazing things. I don't watch it though as much as probably any other film, just because it's a very to me it's a very emotionally charged, takes a lot of energy to watch it. Again, it's not that I skip it, it's not that I don't watch it, but when I think about movies that I love to watch, I'll watch it if it's on. I rarely reach for it though, even though I will say to anybody who listens, to me, I think it's one of the best written, best Star Wars, most important Star Wars stories there is. So, I don't know.
Yeah, but to that point, I think that it's the difference between a really big, like, sitting down and listening to like a Led Zeppelin album versus like easy listening,
right?
Where it's like I have love for all types of music, but if I'm folding clothes, let me throw on Star Wars, like it's probably going to be Solo or Attack of the Clones. Right. Like I want something that is like, rocking, rolling, light, like, or I'll throw on one of the shows. I cannot just throw on The Last Jedi.
Right. Have to sit, you have to watch it, you have to engage with it. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. I could put on Last Jedi. I could, and Scotty said in here joking around that I unwind to the Phantom Menace. The funny thing about Phantom Menace is it used to be my least favorite Star Wars movie, and now it's top 4 or 5. I just absolutely it's become one of my favorite Star Wars movies. And again, it doesn't require a lot of brain power, but it's so important. And like the pod racing scene and the final battle, it just works. But again, as we were saying about Last Jedi, I have to commit to that for the story. So
absolutely
cool. And I will comment on your Rebels thing. I remember the first time I saw some of the images from Rebels, and I remember the picture that sticks with me is the picture of Ezra with the slingshot. I was like, oh no,
yeah,
what's gonna happen?
Me too.
By the time the first episode finished, I said, this feels like Star Wars. Like they captured some sort of magic, and people who have slept on Rebels have absolutely missed some of the best Star Wars storytelling, bar none. It is so good. Yeah.
And I have the same poster. It's all the characters, and Ezra is the biggest. He's got the slingshot. He's got like a charge ready to go.
Yep.
In the town I used to live in, the city I used to live in, the mall, the local mall was right up the road from my house. So I was always there. And you had to pass the Disney store to get to Starbucks. And I was going to grab a coffee one day in 2014, and they had the Rebels poster up in the glass at the Disney store. And I walked past it and I was like, oh, he's got blue hair. He's got a slingshot. Like, what is this? I had not yet opened my mind.
Right.
I was still like, Force Unleashed. I'm going to hack and slash. Like that. And that's not a knock on Force Unleashed, but we had witnessed from 2005 to 2014, a very like, it's only the dark, like Revan, like we were, coming out of that Legends sort of stuff. And some of that I have great love for, but to see this kid, this space Aladdin with his slingshot, I'm like, he's purple and he kind of looks like the Macquarie art. And we're painting our Mandalorian armors now. Flash forward now, I have Sabine Wren's helmet tattooed on my arm. I'm going to cry when Sabine debuts in live action. When we see Ezra again, I'm going to weep. So it's just about being open. That's why when Resistance art started coming around, I was like, not this time. Not this time. I'm going in with my heart open.
It's right. But I mean, like you were saying before, and I think it's, it's a common theme among this conversation is it's Star Wars. You have to, and again, you don't have to love everything about it. I mean, Clone Wars is a great example, right? You could take all 7 seasons. I'm not going to love every episode. There's episodes that I absolutely skip, but you know what? It's part of it. And I think you end up, back to our other conversation, I think you end up feeling like you have to defend things when you shouldn't. We should all be comfortable saying, yeah, I'm a huge Star Wars fan and I didn't love this thing. And that's okay. That's totally okay.
And it's also about and everybody in the comments that listens to my show or has had me on their shows, get ready to drink. I'm going to say my favorite word. It's about the tapestry. Yeah. The tapestry of Star Wars and how things change. Like, I think that the Trace and Rafa arc in the Clone Wars, which was unfairly maligned, in my opinion, I was so deeply happy to see the way that it satisfied me as a defender of the arc, to see how relevant it was for the way Ahsoka acts later on in her life.
Yes.
To see Trace and Rafa show up in Bad Batch. I was like, see, if you just trust the storytellers, it's not unlike Mandalorian season 1.
Yep.
Dave Filoni, who with George established Mandalorian mythology for the most part outside of Legends, and people were questioning him, like,
yeah,
where did this helmet stuff come from? Sabine and Bo-Katan took off their helmets. It's like, how about you let him tell a story?
Yeah.
And I was sitting there during season 1 thinking, I guarantee you he's like Amish or something, and he doesn't even know.
Right.
He's part, and that's what ended up happening. He's part of some fundamentalist culture.
I love how Din Djarin is so unaware about Star Wars. He's living in Star Wars. He is like could potentially become one of the most important characters in Star Wars, but he doesn't know what's going on. Are you a Jedi? Does this look Jedi to you? Who are you?
The best
when
is
Luke Skywalker comes in.
The best is is that a bench? Yeah. Guess I'll take a nap.
Man, he's the best. All right. So the next question on this list is, what's your favorite non-Star Wars movie? Like if you're gonna sit down and watch a movie that's not Star Wars.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, if I'm gonna go to like something that I have like in my back pocket, I know that my letterbox top 4 is Return of the Jedi, Chasing Amy, Kevin Smith film, Inglourious Bastards, and Steve Jobs, the 2015 Danny Boyle film with Michael Fassbender. But there's tons of movies that I mean, in the comic book space, of course, there's quite a few. My favorite Marvel film is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I love The Princess Bride.
Yep.
I love a lot of those classic films. I love Serenity. There's tons that I really, really like, but any of those could be my answer on any given day, for sure. My favorite Spielberg is Hook. So Hook is one that I could go to a lot. Yeah, love Hook. So yeah, any of those on any given day could be the answer. Although it's always nice when something pops in recent years that's like, oh, that's going straight into the list. Like Blade Runner 2049 is one of those. The Batman. The Batman is absolutely one of those. Like I was floored by this movie. So yeah.
Excellent. Cool. All right. Describe Star Wars in 3 words or less.
In 3 words or less.
Yes.
And the 3 words don't have to form a sentence.
Nope. They can.
Okay. They could just be disjoint. It doesn't have to be damn, I used one.
Right, that's
like yeah. Let's see. 3 words or less for Star Wars. I'm going to say mythology, romance, and belief.
Interesting. Belief, sort of a different take on hope.
Yeah, I think that it's belief. Like, yes, it is hopeful, but it's also a belief in anything. You know, if you subscribe to a higher power, it's very obvious what you might attach to that word. But it's also tiny moments like somebody who, like Han Solo, believing in himself against all odds. It's the crew of Rogue One believing in each other. Yep. It's ideas like, you go back to Shmi Skywalker telling Anakin not to look back and believing in him, even if he felt fear, which was obvious to her, even if he was unsure, which was also obvious to her and to Qui-Gon, but the belief that things are going to get better, which is what Hera said, to Ezra, the belief things will get better, and they will. So it's just believing in something, but it's also, if it's describing Star Wars, there's also a lot of negative to belief, because the true believers are the most dangerous people in a lot of ways on the other side, because there are people in the Empire or in the Sith or in any of the groups, the Confederacy, that are there for the paycheck, but then or because that's just the way things are. People like Panaka, people that were just holding on to their positions and stuff. But then there's legitimate believers, and people like Pride, people like Hux, people like, of course, Palpatine and himself, people like Masameda. Belief is what drives all of Star Wars. Even the belief that you're doing what you believe is the best thing to do. Like Luke Skywalker, to him, it was not an exile. To everyone else, it was. To him, it was an active choice to remove the Jedi from the equation because he believed, or he wanted to believe, that it was true. But then, you know, as Yoda rightfully points out, Yoda's like, I'll burn this tree because you keep saying you want it to end and you haven't yet. Yeah. Could have burned it any day. So clearly you don't actually believe what you are saying. So the belief or lack thereof is what I think is the core of so much of it. That's how you get Han Solo from you know, hokey religions all the way to it's true.
Yeah.
Like that's what belief is. So
that's great. I love that. It's cool. What is your favorite Star Wars sound effect?
Oh, that's such a good question. That is an excellent question. Because immediately, I'm sure this happens to all your guests, immediately about 30 of them just played in my head.
Right.
Yeah, in rapid succession. Like I was going through files, like, ooh, what is my favorite? Today, again, this could change, but today I'm going to say the of an Ewok horn.
That's great.
I love the Ewok. I love them so much. Love those guys. The sound of an Ewok horn is fantastic, and getting to actively do one in an Ewok hunt is the best. So yeah, that's what I'll say right now.
That's great. 150 plus episodes. Nobody has said Ewok horn. So congratulations. That's a
yes.
Who's your favorite droid?
My favorite droid, I think again, this is one that alternates so much, but some days I'll give the runner-ups first. Some days it's CB-23 from Resistance. Some days it's BD-1. But a lot of days, and she's who I'll answer with right now, it's L3 from Solo. That was my first exposure to Phoebe Waller-Bridge as an actress, and her sense of comedy and her timing and her voice, the actual sound of her voice is so wonderful, and just like the way she delivered everything. I was like, who is this woman that I've never heard of playing this droid? And they say she has this show called Fleabag, and then I watched Fleabag, and it's it's genius. And so I'll say L3, and her stuff in Last Shot is excellent.
Excellent. Cool. Which Star Wars character would you most like to be, and why?
What I most like to be.
Yeah.
Not who do I think I am. Very different questions.
Correct. Yes.
Who would I like to be? I feel like I would. I think that the reason why I love Sabine Wren so much is because I wish I was her. But I think that's why I have her. I have specifically on my arm tattooed the final helmet from Star Wars Rebels, the one she puts on when Ahsoka picks her up in the epilogue of the show.
Right.
And I specifically picked that, A, because it has the coolest color scheme, but also because I think that the resolute nature inside of her, the way that she was able to stay true to her friends, even in the face of the complete unknown. Just like I told Ezra I would look after this, and I will. And to see the whole journey of how she got there, from this 16-year-old punk rock kid who's dealing with a lot that she's not talking about, that you don't find out until later, all the way up into this woman in her vague 20s, because we don't really know where that is right now. But it's like that journey, that sense of self. Like, I consider myself to be an artistic person, but it's not like I'm out there like, read what I wrote. Like, I have a lot of anxiety about that. And so for Sabine to live loud and to have her art all over what she is and what she does and where she lives and how she affects other people, how her art chronicles the story of her found family and how she's just able to really break through that trauma. Like, I would love to be her in Trials of the Darksaber, but instead of talking about, the Empire's effect on my family, I'd be talking about stuff I've actually been through, actually getting it all out there. I would love to be that woman. And so I think that's why I've identified with her so much. And I it's the first time I've talked about it on a show, but I had the realization a couple months ago, and it was just like whoa, okay, like I really do. That's why I like her, is because all the things that I connect with her on, she has sort of reached like the apotheosis of those attributes or those moments. So
that's great. Cool. I like that. All of us as Star Wars fans, we have collectibles of some sort. What is your favorite Star Wars collectible that you have?
I think that my favorite Star Wars collectible is, and I might be able, I have my Sabi's lightsaber here,
nice, which
I love. I might be able to grab it. Give me one moment.
Absolutely.
Where are you?
That's the great thing about the live version of the show. We always get that people, when you talk to them about their collectibles, they want to go and grab them, which is so cool. That's such a Star Wars thing too.
So this is the maquette of Roran Karab.
That
from the 2D Clone Wars. Now the problem with it is that in my latest move, his fingers got broken, his thumb broke off, and I have it somewhere so I could repair him. I just haven't done it yet, which is why he's not on display. And I unscrewed his lightsaber blade, so he's not in presentation condition at the moment. But they had this bad boy sitting on a convention floor for like $25, and I didn't even realize that they had made a maquette statue of Roran Karab named for, of course, a legendary artist, Ron Cobb. And the fact that they made this, because I love Ithorians, one of my favorite species. And I think that the Tartakovsky 2D Clone Wars is just such genius storytelling.
Yes.
And this guy has some of those iconic moments in the trying to save the Chancellor, doing the scream from his two throats and two mouths. I think they have like four throats. And all the force energy that he imbued into it. And so I love looking at him and just being like, wow, like what a time. That takes me back to like early Star Wars fandom. He's not a character that gets represented a lot. I have this, and I have his only action figure. and I have the book that he's mentioned in, because he used to be just Legends, because that's not a canon show. But shout out to Pablo, he made him canon in one of those lightsaber books. So yeah, I'll say that for right now.
That's cool. I like that. That's very cool. If you could own any Star Wars spaceship or vehicle, which one would it be?
Now, my favorite ship is the N1 Starfighter. So you can imagine how happy I was during the Book of Boba Fett, especially with this new souped up Batmobile hot rod version that Din has. But I don't know if that's what I'd want to own, because I would love to own a ship that could also be homey and very accessible for. I think that I would. I almost said the Ghost. I want the Falcon, but specifically when Lando owned it. I want the Solo Falcon pre-Kessel Run.
Right.
That is nice interiors, the bar, cape closet. Like that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. If you're gonna do the Falcon, that's the time to do it. You don't want the one that you got to fix every day and hope it works when you need it. And
I got porgs living in it now. Like it's a whole thing.
Yeah, it's got to have a smell to it that you just you got to travel long distances. but I like the Ghost as well, because I think the Ghost is again an interesting ship design. You know, that's one of the things about Star Wars is so many things. Your first glance, you're like, that doesn't do it for me. And now, like the Ghost is probably one of my favorite ships. It's just a cool looking ship and got a lot going on. You made reference to it earlier. Is it what's your favorite Star Wars moment? Not necessarily from the films, but a moment that just resonates with you.
I think that, when you open it up to real life, there's so many. I feel like, within the story, I'll answer that first because it's much easier. I think within the story, my favorite Star Wars moment is Luke and Rey, the first lesson with to say that if the Jedi dies, the light dies is vanity. Can you feel that? All that entire conversation, I think, is sort of like the ultimate breakdown of what the themes are. what the battle of light and dark is. The fact that it is actively happening no matter what. And it's about the hubris and the manipulation and inserting ourselves into it and what we surrender. So much of Star Wars is about surrendering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that my favorite moment, though, it's like there are some that I wish I could go back and live again that are like hazy moments. Like I remember seeing Attack of the Clones for the first time and theaters, and seeing Obi-Wan and Mace go back to back in the Petronaki Arena, defending each other and everything, and just thinking like, what is happening? Like, I never thought that there could be this many Jedi. Like, what is going on? I would love to relive that again. But I think that it's a cheat answer, but I feel like my favorite Star Wars moment is anytime that I'm talking to a friend, a really close friend that I made because of Star Wars. That's a Star Wars moment.
Yeah.
When you talk to people and you have really, really like deep conversations, like I'll give a shout out to our friend, Jerry Cable from Bombadcast. Like Jerry and I have had, and again, there are so many, but just off the top of my head, Jerry and I recently have had so many deep life conversations one-on-one of just like stuff that we relate over. And it's funny that I picked Jerry as the example, because I met Jerry by complete random happenstance. I had no idea who he was, did not follow him on social media. I met him on the floor of Celebration Chicago. He was just standing next to me. And I guess the rest of his group wasn't around at the moment. And he was like, "Oh, I'm Jerry." I was like, "Oh, I'm Alden." And we just, exchanged Twitter handles and stuff. Hey, this guy. Wow, that's synergy, baby.
That's
right there.
The force moves in mysterious ways.
The force willed Jerry into the chat. Yeah, Jerry, I'm talking about how we met. You remember? But yeah, we ended up just hitting it off, and we followed each other after that. And now, almost 3 full years later, we're talking about life and love and heartbreak and depression and all this real stuff and jobs and kids and just everything. And that's actively because of some kid in Modesto in the 70s that liked to race cars saying, "Oh, I can't get the rights to Flash Gordon, so I'll do this instead." And it made us all friends and gave it, like, for some of us, like you've had, you've done your writing in the past and everything and been in this space, and like I've been in this space and the opportunities that we've been afforded, and it's like it's wild that it all is because of this.
And it's that thing that I try to capture with the show, is that moment when two Star Wars fans meet. And it is amazing when you think of it that way. George Lucas will be remembered for Star Wars and for the technology and filmmaking and his storytelling, but we need to remember that without that, these sort of conversations don't happen. These sort of friendships don't happen. And it's, I remember my very best friend, who I've known since I was in 4th grade, still, he's my son's godfather. We met, he just moved into the neighborhood. There were 2 questions that I asked him. And the second one was, "Do you like Star Wars?" And he said yes. And we became best friends from that moment forward. And so it's really wild. George's legacy is in the tangible side, but the intangible is really what's much more important. So that's
true.
Pretty wild.
It's the relationships that, with Celebration sort of being top of mind for all of us at the present moment. Maybe people are watching this way after the fact and Celebration's already happened, in which case, hello from the past. But it's that electricity of, we're going to be able to go home.
Yeah,
we're going to be able to see our tribe. Like that's so important. So
yeah, it's amazing. I have been a Star Wars fan for 44 years, but I've never been to Celebration, so I'm very excited about this year. It's going to be amazing. And the last question is, what is your go-to Star Wars quote?
I sort of have used 2 of them here, so I'll give a different answer. The ones I've used are the only what you take with you, which is super important, and then to say that if the Jedi dies, it dies is vanity. But I think I'm trying to decide on a Han quote or something like that, or a Sabine quote, because Han and Sabine are my 2 favorite characters. But it's nope, I got it.
Here it comes.
I'm gonna be cute and give a non in-story answer. My favorite Star Wars quote comes from Taika Waititi, and it was in the first gallery special. If I can remember correctly, I'm pretty sure it's episode 2 of the first Mandalorian gallery. If people want to go check it out. And Taika is describing what Star Wars is and the tone and the feel. And they're talking about how it's different for everybody and all these experiences. And Taika Waititi very simply says, it doesn't take itself 100% seriously, but it does believe in itself. And I think that I could not even believe that he so effortlessly summed it up. And how that's our friendships. That's the actual story. That's our podcast. That's our art. That's our fan films. That's our fanfic. That's everything. It's like, it does not take itself 100% seriously, but we believe in it. People say like, oh, you take Star Wars so seriously sometimes when they're not in the space. And it's like, I do, but don't get me wrong. I know it's goofy. I know it's ridiculous. I know it's fantasy. I know it's all of these things, but it comes back to that idea of belief and the fact that being serious and taking it yourself seriously those are mutually exclusive things. And I think that somewhere in that statement is the perfect tone. And it was at that moment that I was pleading in my mind for him to get a Star Wars film. And the fact that he has one now in the works is extremely exciting. So.
Yeah, that's a great one too. I mean, it's Ash Crossan, when she was on the show, she said Star Wars is sort of like your kid brother. You care very much about it, but you can give it a hard time when you need to. And so it's that same kind of thing. And I think, again, it seems like this running theme of this conversation is that, it's about what it means to you. What does Star Wars mean to you? And anything you love, as you were saying before, some days it's going to piss you off. Some days you're going to forgive its worst moments. But at the end of the day, it's always there. And you always have this sort of this feeling that's evoked by it. When somebody says Star Wars to you, something hits you. When you pass somebody wearing a Star Wars t-shirt, when you get an email alert or a news story alert that something's happening in Star Wars, something happens. A little switch goes off that's different than anything else in your life, and that's really wild. And that quote is a fantastic way to sum it up.
Absolutely.
So, Alden, where can people find you on the interwebs these days?
So and first of all, thank you again for having me on and for going long. We didn't get to the Bombad length.
Yeah, we're not at Bombad length.
We will though. We'll do something. But yeah, I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. I love the questionnaire. I love the conversation because I think that stuff's important to dive into. So it's been a lot of fun. And if you want to follow me, it's right here. It's at that Alden Diaz, ThatAldenDiaz. You can follow Octa Radio, a Star Wars podcast. That's my show / feed where you have the core show, which is one-on-one interviews, not similar to this one with people in the Star Wars space. There's been actors, there's been writers, there's been Lucasfilm folks, different various topics, and soon to be more various topics of different things, awesome. New kinds of guests, things like that. There's the Mandalorian Creed on there, hosted by Tori Fox, which is like the multi-part breakdowns of the different topics in Star Wars, be they Disney related, be they droids. We did the Book of Boba Fett coverage there, and then a rewatch Between Worlds, which I already spoke about. That's our Rebels rewatch show. I'm also on the One and Done Film Club podcast, which you can find linked through my Twitter to get to that show with Nikki Kumar and Reed Devaney. I do a Batman show. I don't do a Batman show. I am the co-host on a Batman show, Charlie Ashby's Batman show, Batman Returned. I produce radio professionally. I'm constantly plugged in to my own detriment. So yeah,
for better or worse, you're always connected. So, but yeah. I'm glad you're connected. I'm glad that we got this opportunity to talk. Again, as I said at the top, it's really interesting how paths can cross regularly in social media. You can comment on each other's things. You can even form an opinion of somebody that changes and becomes, again, just the fact that you said, that The Last Jedi is your favorite, it didn't affect me. I'm okay with that. I can live with that. But I think it's really great that we can have these conversations, and I would love to have you on again. And I can't wait to meet you in person in California in less than 3 months. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, man.
Man.
We're gonna get those blue milk drink specials. Some bar in Anaheim. We're gonna be at we're going to the PF Chang's near Disneyland. Ask Scotty about it. So
all right, I will
meet
I'll
up
make
at
sure
the
to get
PF Chang's.
Excellent. Well, Alden, thank you very much, man. This was a lot of fun, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.